So with that, our next speaker is Dr. Ali Alhalawani. He was an assistant professor for linguistics and Quranic sciences. He worked at multiple universities, IIUM, the Islamic University in Malaysia. He graduated from Al-Azhar University. He worked in the Misr University in Egypt as well. And he was part of multiple dawah committees in his, journey until here. And right now, he's a published scholar, author, writer, and translator, and is a teacher here at the Siraj Institute in Ottawa. So with that, Dr. Ali, his topic actually is on Sharia inheritance and the legal definitions based on the Quran, Hadith, and Fiqh, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستبينه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. إنه من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. طبتم وطاب ممشاكم وتبوأتم من الجنة منزلا. Thank you so much for coming today. And I wasn't told about this huge number of people, so I'm a little bit, fearful. Yeah. So you're most welcome, every one of you. Today, inshallah, we're going to talk about the legal will, al-Wasiyyah. We're going to talk about some rulings and real-life examples. I'm going to give you some real-life examples from life that will explain to us, so many maybe hidden sides of the Wasiyyah. First of all, what's meant by a Wasiyyah? But even before this, do you know when you're gonna die? Does any one of us know when we will die? For sure no, right? This is something of the unseen. This has been kept by Allah the Almighty, hidden from us all in order for us to increase in good deeds, right? Not to know when to die in order to increase yourself or get increased in terms of doing good deeds. And one may become bedridden or flat on his back or tied to a bed for years and years. And sometimes we may have someone or many people who die all as a sudden. Surprisingly, they die. Sometimes you have just met with a friend of yours or one of your kith and kin, one of your relatives. You had lunch together, and after 1 hour after you left each other, you pick up the phone and you hear that he had just passed away. This is, this is life. C'est la vie, as they say in French. This is life. So no one can be so sure that he's gonna live for 2 or 3 or more years. And death can overtake us all of as a sudden, and we have to be ready, and we have to be prepared for this. At the same time, life is very, very complicated. Life is very complicated. It's full of so many things. And if you have a business, if you have a, something like a financial interaction with others, many things will arise out of that business. You're gonna find simulated contracts, real contracts. You're gonna find loans will emerge, debts will emerge, and so on and so forth. So all these things has to be registered. All these things has to be very, very clarified in order to save the rights of others and to save your own rights and the rights of your ears and the rights of others as well. So if we know that life can take any one of us in the blink of an eye, we have to get ready and we have to get everything prepared properly and in the most appropriate manner. And to do that, we have to know all about, we have to know all about the legal side of things, the legal side of the Wasiyyah, and by legal here I mean the Sharia-based side of the Wasiyyah, and the legal side, the law side, which we are going to learn about through our lawyers today, inshallah, because I believe we're going to have two legal experts, right? I believe, I have been told that we're going to have two lawyers or three, mashallah. We're going to have 3 legal experts today in order to answer all your questions concerning Wasiyyah, especially in the context of Canada, because when we talk about the Sharia-based issue, when we talk about the Sharia-based rulings and principles, we, to some extent, talk about some, sometimes some specific issues and sometimes very generic issues. But to project these things and to take them to the ground in the Canadian context, we need to learn to experts. We need to learn and to listen to those who are well versed on this, and that's why, inshallah, we're going to have these 3 legal experts or 3 legal lawyers today, inshallah. So, if we know that death can overtake any one of us in any time, we have to get ready, we have to get prepared, and this makes defining relationships between me and others in terms of the financial transactions, the contracts and the debts and the loans and everything. This makes it necessary and mandatory. So now, what is a Wasiyyah? What is a Wasiyyah? When a Muslim dies, there are 4 rights to be fulfilled and achieved. 4 rights. The first right is to pay for the funeral expenses. The funeral expenses of the deceased, of the dead person, they have to be paid out of his wealth, out of his property and out of his wealth. The second right is to pay his debts. Any debts that he has on him, any debts that he has for others, they have to be paid off. Then the execution of his Wasiyyah. If he leaves a Wasiyyah, this Wasiyyah has to be fulfilled, has to be carried out or executed by those who are responsible or those who are made in charge of executing the Wasiyyah. The fourth thing is to distribute the remainder or the rest of the wealth among the legal heirs of that deceased person. So when a person dies, we have four rights. The first is the funeral expenses, the second is the debts, then
Wasiyyah.
the Wasiyyah, execution of the Wasiyyah, and the fourth is the distribution of the remainder amount or the rest of the wealth among the legal heirs. And this is very, very important. And the Wasiyyah is called a Wasiyyah because it's a transaction which comes into operation and become effective immediately after the death of the deceased person, who we call the testator. The one who writes his Wasiyyah is called in Sharia, or in legal terms, a testator. Testator, the one who makes his Wasiyyah, and it's to be executed after his death and never before his death. Because if he wants something to be effective and to be executed during his lifetime, this is no longer a Wasiyyah. This is no longer called a Wasiyyah. This is called a hiba, or a gift. if you give someone something during your lifetime and you want this something to be used by him and to be enjoyed by him during your lifetime, this is called a hiba or a gift and not a wasiyah, because a wasiyah has to be executed and carried out and fulfilled after the death of the testator himself. And the one who receives, or the one who the wasiyah is done on his behalf, is called a legatee. A legatee. We need to know these two terms. We have the testator, the one who makes the wasiyah, and the legatee, the one who receives the wasiyah, or the beneficiary of the wasiyah. What is the importance of writing one's will or one's wasiyah? And excuse me, because I know this topic is very tough and rough, and it's not something flexible. I know that, but it's full of legal and Sharia-based information and data. So here I would be. I wish it could be more pleasant than this, but here we're talking about death, we're talking about passing away, we're talking about inheritance, we're talking about bequeathing. But this is not something pleasant, but at the same time it's very crucial and very, very important, especially when we live in the West, when we live in other than Islamic countries. So the importance of writing one's will. First, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in a hadith, إذا مات ابن آدم انقطع عمله إلا من ثلاث. إذا مات ابن آدم انقطع عمله إلا من ثلاث. When the son of Adam dies, his actions stop unless he does three things, or except for three things, right? So here, if a Muslim dies, his good deeds will stop unless he makes his wasiyah, unless he writes and registers his wasiyah. If he wants his good deeds to continue after his death, he has to write his wasiyah, because this wasiyah enables him to do good deeds, enables him to increase himself, to get increased in doing good deeds through the ways I'm gonna tell you now. So a wasiyah may render the good deeds of a deceased person continuous even after his death. If he bequeaths part of his wealth to be given to someone, to be given to the poor, to be given to the needy, to be given to the destitute, to be given to an education institution, to be given to OMA or any other mosque. So this is gonna be regarded by Allah the Almighty as a sadaqah jariyah, and the reward that will be incurred via or through this portion of his wealth that he gave to Allah the Almighty, that he gave for the sake of Allah the Almighty, will increase him in good deeds, inshallah, till the day of resurrection and till the end of days. So no one wants to be deprived of this, and this deprivation, this hirman, we're going to talk about this inshallah a little bit in a few minutes through one of the hadiths of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ibn Qudama, once Ibn Qudama was asked, who is the happy person? Who is the happy one? And I'm asking you, who is the happy one? Sister, can you answer me? Who is the happy one in this present life?
The one who follows God's deeds and do the things as it's required in the Islamic religion.
Perfect. MashaAllah. Jazakumullah khairan. Do we have a better answer than this one? No, right? No. But when Ibn Qudama was asked about who is the happy person, he said that the happy person is the one whose good deeds do not stop when he passes away, when he dies, when he breathes his last. This is the happy one. Because, our lives are very confined. Our lives are very limited, right? We may live for 50, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, even 90 years, but after that, we're gonna die, right? Everyone is gonna die. But if you do this, if you have your wasiyah, if you do something good in your wasiyah, your good deeds will continue till the end of days, till the day of resurrection. And Ibn Qudama considers the one who writes his wasiyah and gets it registered for him and for the years. He considers him to be the happy one. No one can be more happy than the one whose good deeds will be continuous until the end of days, right? عن أنس بن مالك قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم المحروم, this is the abbreviation, المحروم من حرم وصيته. المحروم من حرم وصيته. The deprived one, the deprived person is the person who is deprived of his will. The deprived person is the one who is deprived of his will. But what does deprivation here mean? It means that he is deprived of having his good deeds continuous or continue after his death. His good deeds will stop when he breathes his last. So he is deprived. And this is a hadith by the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And some scholars say, al-mahrum man hurima wasiyatahu. This means that he is deprived of goodness. He is deprived of goodness. He is deprived of the continuation of his good deeds after his death. And by the way, to be deprived of one's will means, it may mean, or it either mean that he ignores it totally, he doesn't write his will, or when he writes his will, he causes some harm to one or more of his ears. This is another sort or another type of deprivation. Okay, so either he leaves it totally leaves it and neglects it, or he causes some harm or some damage to one or more of his ears. And there's another form of deprivation. That's he has some obligations. He has some obligations with him for others. He has some obligations for others. He has some rights. He has some rights for others, like a loan or a debt or a wadi'ah. And he doesn't write. And then the wadi'ah after his death, it's lost, and no one knows whose wadi'ah is this one. And the ears think that this is part of the wealth they have inherited, and they eat the haram without knowing that. So this is some sort of deprivation of the goodness of writing one's will as well. So if you want our good deeds to continue after our death, we have to write the Wasiyyah, and have to here doesn't mean the wujub, because there is some sort of dispute among Muslim scholars whether the Wasiyyah is wajib or it's optional. There is a dispute between them over that. But when it comes to the rights of others, it is mandatory, it is necessary. It's necessary for you, it's mandatory upon you, it's wajib on you to write down in order to preserve and protect the rights of others, because Allah the Almighty will ask you about these rights. Allah the Almighty will ask you about these rights. Allah the Almighty will ask you about the rights of yourself upon yourself, your own rights upon yourself, and the rights of others upon you, and the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you. So we are going to be asked and be held responsible in front of Allah the Almighty for 3 different kinds of rights: towards ourselves, towards others, and towards Allah the Almighty. Another thing that tells us that writing a Wasiyyah is a very important and necessary thing is that there is a grand illusion, هناك وهم كبير, very, very grand illusion, that someone may say, okay, writing the Wasiyyah, this is not for me, I'm too young. I'm too young, I'm not gonna die while I'm 47 like me. No. Or while I'm 18, no, I'm not gonna die. Wasiyyah should be written by those who are 80 or 90 years old. Not for me. I'm too young. I'm not gonna die in this early age. But this is a grand illusion, because in real life we see that many people who are 18 years old and maybe less, they die all of a sudden, right? We see this. This is life. We see this. No one can be so sure that he's gonna live for another 10 or 20 or 30 years. No one. So if we are so sure, I'm going to repeat this, if we are so sure that death can overtake us at any time, at the blink of an eye, so we have to get ready, we have to be prepared for it, and we have to prepare answers to be given in front of Allah the Almighty whenever He asks us about anything that we have written in our Wasiyyah, and we're going to come to this inshallah. Wisdom of having one's Wasiyyah written. عن أبي هريرة قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله تصدق عليكم إن الله تصدق عليكم عند وفاتكم بثلث أموالكم. لماذا؟ زيادة لكم في أعمالكم. إن الله تصدق عليكم عند وفاتكم بثلث أموالكم زيادة لكم في أعمالكم. It was narrated from Abu Hurairah that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been charitable with you. Allah the Almighty has been charitable with you with 1/3 of your wealth, 1/3 of your properties. Upon the time of your death, upon the time when death approaches you, in order for you to be increased in good deeds. In order for your good deeds to be increased. So, the Wasiyyah gives that testator, the one who makes and the one who writes the Wasiyyah. The Wasiyyah gives that testator an opportunity. It's a golden opportunity for each and every one of us to help others. To help others, to advance and to project and to provide and to give some good deeds before you die. So if you have a wealth, if you have a property, and you can assign part of that property, and we're gonna talk about the amount of that assignment, inshallah, about the amount of that property. You have to, or you can. It's optional for you. You can assign part of this property to a charitable organization, to a mosque, an educational center, and you can assign it to a grandchild who is deprived of the inheritance. Because if we have a father who dies and he has a son or more, and he will not inherit, right? That's why we have the Al-Wasiyyah Al-Wajibah. The Al-Wasiyyah Al-Wajibah is written by the grandfather to his grandson in case the father dies before the right? Am I right? So this gives that stater an opportunity to increase in good deeds and to help others who are not entitled to inherit anything from him, but they are needy and destitute and really need to be given something in order to sustain in order for them to continue their lives. Also, the Wasiyyah can be used to clarify the nature of joint accounts. If we have a joint account, if we have a joint account between a spouse and a man and his wife, or between two different persons, and we do not have defining lines between them in terms of their rights. So a Wasiyyah can solve this problem for us. And when you can, through this Wasiyyah, appoint a guardian for your children to take care your children after you pass away, and also for those people who live in commensality, a Wasiyyah can solve so many problems among them as well. And in countries where the Interstate Succession Act, this means the one who dies without writing his Wasiyyah. If the laws in these countries are different from Islamic law, and they're definitely going to be different from Islamic law and Sharia law, so writing a Wasiyyah in this case is mandatory and necessary in order to preserve and to protect the rights of your heirs and the rights of those whom you are responsible for in front of Allah the Almighty. Allah the Almighty says, كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن ترك خيرا الوصية للوالدين إن ترك خيرا, if he leaves a wealth, if he leaves a property, الوصية to bequeath or to make a wasiyyah to the parents and to his kith and kin, and this is حقا على المتقين, this is an a duty upon the righteous. روى البخاري ومسلم عن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: ما حق امرئ مسلم له شيء يوصي فيه ما حق امرئ مسلم له شيء يوصي فيه يبيت ليلتين إلا ووصيته مكتوبة عنده. ما حق امرئ مسلم له شيء يوصي فيه يبيت ليلتين إلا ووصيته مكتوبة عنده. It was narrated from Ibn Umar that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the Muslim man has no right. The Muslim man has no right to spend 2 nights if he has something for which a will should be made without having a written will with him. Here the hadith, and this hadith is narrated, is compiled in Al-Bukhari and Muslim, and this is a Sahih hadith. The hadith dictates or says 2 nights. It's unlawful for you, it's not acceptable from any Muslim who has a property, something regarding which he can make a bequest or a wasiyyah, to stay or to spend 2 nights unless he has a wasiyyah written with him. So it's not acceptable from that. But the hadith says 2 nights. My question now is the condition of 2 nights is a defining condition or just an illustrative one? No, it's an illustrative one. This means that the 2 nights are not meant for themselves. The number here is not meant. The exact number of 2 nights is not meant. But what is meant is that you shouldn't, if you have something to make a bequest regarding, so you don't have the right to spend days after days and nights after nights unless you write a wasiyyah. So the 2 days as a specific duration of time, a specific period of time are not meant here. What's meant is that you should hasten, you should do it as soon as possible if you have something to make a wasiyyah, right? So this is one thing. So الليلتين الواردتين في الحديث ليس هما للتأكيد for emphasis وليس للتحديد. The opinion or the view of the majority of scholars is that wasiyyah is manduba, it's mandatory. Wasiyyah is mandatory according to the majority of scholars. It's manduba, it's recommendatory according to the majority of scholars. But Ibn Hazm wa Akharun says it's mandatory. It's an obligation, it's a wajib, but they don't have any proof on this. Even this hadith doesn't say that it's mandatory or it's a wajibah, but as I said before, in the context where we live, when we live in a non-Muslim country and the laws are different from the Sharia laws, we have to write our wasiyas in order to preserve the rights of those we are responsible for and our heirs, our kids, and our relatives. So from this side, it's mandatory, it's necessary, and it's very, very crucial. And it's recommendatory. It's recommended to hasten to write your wasiyyah and to get it witnessed to. You have witnesses. You have to register it and you have to bring 2 witnesses to witness to the wasiyyah. And if it happens that you want to change your mind about something that you have written in your previous wasiyyah, you can issue another or a new wasiyyah, or you can add or delete from the previous one. It's your right to do that as a testator. The testator has all the right to change the wasiyyah as long as he is sane and he knows and understands and appreciates the consequences of each and every act that he does in this present life. What are the rights and duties after death? Okay, yeah, we said that before, right? The 4 rights. But now,
Excuse me, can I have a question here?
can we postpone the questions till the Q&A session? Okay, thank you so much. You can, jot down or write down. How can we protect the rights of our rights and the rights of others without registering and without writing these? Allah the Almighty in Ayat al-Dayn orders the Muslims to write down the debts, right? If you have a debt, if you have a loan, if you have something borrowed, if you have a wadi'a, if you have something, you have to write down and you have to get it written down either by yourself or by a notary or someone who is specialized in this issue, and you have to bring some witnesses to witness to this thing. This is for the protection and the preservation of the rights of every one. But if we have a simulated contract means عقد صوري, right? Simulated contract. You have something, and this thing is written in the name of another person. It's written in the name of another person. Let's imagine this cell phone this is mine. I bought it, okay? But it's written in the name of Brother Wael or Brother Majid. So how can I prove this without having a document, without having something which is written and registered, that tells the people, that tells the whole world that this thing belongs to Ali and not to Majid or to Brother Majid or Sheikh Majid or Brother Wael, who have, you know, another piece of paper that says it's them, it's theirs. So everything has to be written down, everything has to be registered, especially when we have simulated contracts. Someone who was a very well-off person, who was very rich, he was a businessman, he had his workshop, and he was very, very healthy. One day, while he was sitting in his shop, he died. He died. As simple as that, he died. He breathed his last. And he didn't write anything. He didn't make his Wasiyyah. After his death, his sons and daughters spent more than 3 years trying to restore their rights from his partner. His partner, who was an employee in his company, he claimed that he has half of the whole company. Half of the whole company belongs to him. And there was nothing written. There was nothing documented that proves this. Everyone, all the heirs and all the employees, all the other employees in the company knew for sure that he has only 1/3 of the company and not half. But it took the years and years, and this put them in too much trouble in order to prove that he has only 1/3 and not 1/2 of that property. Why? Because the owner, the man himself, didn't write his will and didn't define the relationship between him and between his partner, who has been or who was one of his employees as well. So writing a will and defining relationships between you and between anyone else is very, very important and crucial, and may save your heirs a lot of trouble and hardship. Another thing, imagine that someone has entrusted you with something. You have a simulated contract. Someone came to you and he told you that I'm gonna write this thing in your name. And he does that. He writes this bottle of water in your name. Then you die. Not you. Then he dies. Okay? The one who has been entrusted with that wadi'ah, he dies. And he didn't write anything, he didn't document this. What will his heirs do? What will they do? Will they keep what they have with them and consider it as their own property and their own wealth, and thus they are gonna eat haram and eat unlawful property without knowing that? Or should they give anyone who comes to them and claims that he has something with their father, and they give it just like that? So you're gonna put your heirs in too much trouble if you don't write and if you don't document everything. This is very, very important. Very important. عن أبي هريرة قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. والله, this hadith I'm gonna read to you now is a terrifying and scary hadith. To me, and I think to everyone. Listen to the hadith. عن أبي هريرة قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الرجل لا يعمل بعمل أهل الخير إن الرجل لا يعمل بعمل أهل الخير 70 سنة فإذا أوصى حاف في وصيته فيختم له بشر عمله فيدخل النار. Again, and I'm gonna say this translation. إن الرجل لا يعمل بعمل أهل الخير 70 سنة فإذا أوصى حاف في وصيته فيختم له بشر عمله فيدخل النار وإن الرجل The Prophet said, our deen is balanced deen. ديننا متوازن, alhamdulillah. We have, something pleasant, and at the same time you have to be fearful when you do something bad. Alhamdulillah. It's like this. دين متوازن. Alhamdulillah. إن الرجل لا يعمل بعمل أهل الخير 70 سنة ثم فإذا أوصى حاف في وصيته فيختم له بشر عمله فيدخل النار وإن الرجل لا يعمل بعمل أهل الشر 70 سنة فيعدل في وصيته فيختم له بخير عمله فيدخل الجنة. So we have this and we have that, and you choose for yourself. Translation. It was narrated from Abu Hurairah that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a man may do the deeds of the people of goodness for 70 years. A man may do the deeds of goodness of the people of goodness for 70 years. Then, when he makes his will, he is unjust in his will. He is unjust. He acts unjustly in his will. So he ends his life with evil deeds and enters hell. And on the contrary, on the other hand, and a man may do the deeds of the people of evil for 70 years, then he is just in his will, so he ends his life with good deeds and enters paradise. So we have to choose for ourselves. If you are to write your wasiyyah, if you are to make a wasiyyah to any of your heirs, you have to be just. You have to observe justice, because Allah the Almighty is never unjust to anyone, but we are unjust to ourselves. And if you are unjust to yourself and unjust to your heirs, you're gonna incur Allah's wrath on the day of judgment. And no one of us can, no one of us loves this to happen to him, right? The Quran says, من بعد وصية يوصى بها أو دين غير مضار, as long as there is no damage or harm caused. If you write your wasiyyah, make sure that you are just in your wasiyyah. You write it justly, and you give each and everyone his due right, and never be unjust in doing that, and never intend to cause harm or damage to anyone, because if you intend to cause harm or damage to anyone, your wasiyyah is gonna be nullified. You don't know that. Your wasiyyah is gonna be nullified in this present life, and you're gonna receive the punishment from Allah the Almighty on the day of resurrection. So you will lose it all. You will lose in this present life and in the hereafter as well, and no one of us likes this to happen to him. Right? And Jabir, and this hadith is, wonderful. All the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ are wonderful, but what I mean is that it gives us glad tidings. It gives us, glad tidings and pleasant things. And Jabir ibn Abdullah قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من مات على وصية, the one who dies after he writes his wasiyyah. من مات على وصية, or after he leaves his wasiyyah. من مات على وصية مات على سبيل. He dies while following the right path. مات على سبيل. He dies while following the right path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. مات على سبيل وسنة, and according to the sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. ومات على تقى, and he died as being righteous and pious. وشهادة, and martyrdom. ومات مغفورا له, and he dies as is forgiven for. So these are 5 pleasant things, 5 glad tidings from Allah the Almighty, and we have been told about this by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The hadith مرة أخرى again من مات على وصية مات على سبيل وسنة ومات على شهادة ومات على تقى وشهادة ومات مغفورا له. Whoever dies leaving a will behind, he dies on the right path and as following the Sunnah, and he dies with piety and martyrdom, and he dies while he is forgiven. And all of us, we like to have all these 5 things, inshallah. There's a very, very confusing and tricky question here. Why should I write my wasiyyah while the Prophet ﷺ didn't leave a wasiyyah? Do you know, does any one of us here know that the Prophet ﷺ wrote his wasiyyah or left a wasiyyah behind? No, the Prophet ﷺ didn't write his wasiyyah. So why should we do with them? Why should we do that? We are following the Prophet ﷺ. We claim to follow the Prophet ﷺ. We claim to be on the right path of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't write his wasiyyah. Why? So why should I? Why should I write my wasiyyah? Yes?
He didn't have any dependent?
He didn't?
Have any dependent?
He didn't have, no, the Prophet ﷺ left his daughters, right? He left his daughters. Al-Anbiya la yurathun. This is one of the rulings, yes. Another thing, yeah, perfect.
He had a couple of coins left, so he didn't have any assets to give away, and he told Aisha radiallahu anha to give them to the poor people before he passes away.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. That's it. Yeah, all your answers are correct and wonderful, MashaAllah. You don't need me to be here. We have to switch. Okay, so عن عائشة قالت, Lady عائشة عن عائشة قالت, ما ترك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم دينارا ولا درهما. ما ترك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم دينارا ولا درهما ولا شاة ولا بعيرا ولا أوصى بشيء. ما ترك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم دينارا ولا درهما ولا شاة ولا بعيرا ولا أوصى بشيء. The messenger, Lady Aisha narrated, the messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam didn't leave behind a dinar nor a dirham. Didn't leave behind a dinar nor a dirham, nor a sheep nor a camel. And he didn't make a will concerning anything. And this hadith is compiled and narrated by Ibn Majah. The Prophet ﷺ didn't write his wasiyyah because he didn't have anything to write to anyone. The Prophet ﷺ came to this life and gave it all he got. All he got. The Prophet ﷺ exerted his whole effort in order to call for Allah the Almighty and to call for monotheism and to call for the worship of Allah the Almighty, and he left nothing. All the Prophet ﷺ left, and by the way, the Prophet ﷺ, though he gave it all, he didn't receive anything in return. The Prophet ﷺ didn't even see the victory of Islam over the Romans and the Persians. That happened, and that took place during the lifetime of the Khulafa. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Uthman, and Sayyidina Umar, and Sayyidina Ali, and all of them. So the Prophet ﷺ gave it all. He exerted his effort in calling to Allah the Almighty, and he received nothing in this present life because Allah the Almighty kept it all for him in the hereafter, inshaAllah. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't leave, I'm receiving, okay. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't leave anything. He didn't leave a dirham nor a dinar. All he left was a very small piece of land, which he left for the public interest. He left for the public interest because the prophets are not supposed to be inherited by anyone, like our dear Ustaz said just now. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ left a piece of land and left it for the public interest, and he left a mule and a weapon and told everyone these are not to be inherited. These are not to be inherited by anyone. But the Sahaba didn't do that. The Sahaba didn't do that. The Sahaba bequeathed or assigned part of their wealth in order to get increased in good deeds after their death. And that's what we are trying to emulate. That's what we are trying to copy and to do and to follow their steps in that. Right? How a will should be written. How a will should be written. Sheikh Majid told you that there is no specific wording of writing a will, and this is perfectly correct. There is no specific wording for making a will or is necessary for making a will. The Wasiyyah in Sharia, in the Islamic Sharia, can be written or oral. You can write your Wasiyyah, or you can tell your Wasiyyah to someone who is, someone you trust, and he's gonna execute it after your death. And you have to have, witnesses. And even the issue of witnesses has some details. So no specific wording is necessary for writing a Wasiyyah. And the Wasiyyah can be oral or written. And the Wasiyyah has to be executed after the death of the testator. And the testator, the one who writes the Wasiyyah, he should specify this and he should clarify this in his Wasiyyah and say that this is to be executed and carried out and fulfilled after my death. Because if it is to be fulfilled and carried out during his lifetime, this is not a Wasiyyah, this is a hiba, as we said before. Yeah. There should be two witnesses to the declaration of the Wasiyyah. There should be two witnesses to the declaration of Wasiyyah. If you have an oral Wasiyyah, you have to bring two witnesses. But if you write your Wasiyyah, you don't have to have witnesses. You don't have to have witnesses. It only your handwriting. If your handwriting is known to be yours, or your signature is on the document, so this is sufficient. This is enough. Okay, so if you have a written document, a written Wasiyyah, and you don't have witnesses, it's sufficient to have your handwriting to be known by your relatives, or it's sufficient to have your signature on that document. And I believe this is the Sharia. This is the Sharia ruling. But in this modern life, we have to listen to the legal experts. We have to listen to the lawyers that are coming after Dhuhr, inshallah. They, I believe, اسألوا أهل الذكر. They are the أهل الذكر of this zaman, and in this context, in Canada and in the West. So we have to listen to them. The Wasiyyah is executed after payment of debts and funeral expenses, and the debts of Allah, be it a zakah that you haven't paid, being a hajj that you haven't performed and you have assigned someone to do it for you on your behalf after your death. These are debts for Allah the Almighty. These debts have to be paid. These debts have to be paid after your death and taken away out of your wealth. Now we're going to talk about the different types of, or the different rulings pertaining to the Wasiyyah. A Wasiyyah can be compulsory, wajiba. It can be manduba, recommendatory. It can be makruha, detestable. It can be mubaha, right? Acceptable or optional. And it can be forbidden for sure, muharrama. Let's start with the wajiba, al-wasiyya al-wajiba, the compulsory wasiyya. This is pertaining to or concerning paying of the debts and return of legacies. If you have a legacy, if you have a wadi'a, if you have a debt to anyone, this has to be written. 2 minutes? No way. No way. No way. No way.
10 minutes behind.
No way. No way. Put another 10 minutes. Okay. So, someone who entrusted you with $100,000 and he went for Hajj and you didn't write anything. And the one who was entrusted with that amount of money, he died without writing anything. The heirs will consider this sum of money as part of their wealth. So this is a great problem. What should be done then? So it has to be documented, it has to be written. And من عد غدا من أجله فقد أساء صحبة الموت. The man who considers tomorrow as part of his lifetime, he doesn't know anything about death, because death can overtake anyone at any time in the blink of an eye, as we said before. So if you have trust, if you have a legacy or amana to anyone, you have to document that, you have to write that in order to preserve the right and in order to prevent your heirs from eating what is haram, eating what is unlawful to them. I'm gonna, yeah. Okay, someone who wrote everything he has, wrote his whole wealth, his car, his house, his company. His house is a house that is worth millions. He wrote all this in the name of another person, lest they should be confiscated by the tyrant ruling regime in his country, or something like that. And if this is not documented, if this is not written, all this will be gone, and the heirs will be left in great hardship. And someone who put aside his zakat, or put aside the money for the alternative hajj, he put them aside in the safe, but he didn't tell the heirs, he didn't write his wasiyyah regarding that. So the heirs after his death will consider this as part of their wealth, and they are going to spend it without spending in the channels they were assigned to, paying the zakah and doing performing the alternative hajj. So you're going to be punished by Allah the Almighty as long as you don't notify them and let them know about these things. One person, a man, came to a Syrian scholar and said his brother was an executor of a will. كان وصيا مختارا. His brother was an executor of a will, and there was an amount of money, a sum of money, 8,000 liras, that was assigned to be spent on the masjid. And that executor of the will, he spent it on himself, recklessly, without knowing, or it was his will, it was his niyyah to devour what is haram, whatever. His sister used to see him in her dreams burning in the fire. And he used to scream and tell her or say, "Save me, my sister, save me, my sister. It's the 8,000 liras. When his sister told their other brother about the issue, his brother paid off that money to the channels eligible for it, to the masjid, and his brother, alhamdulillah, was saved. So we have to be very careful, very, very careful about these issues. So a wasiyyah becomes mandatory or compulsory when a debt, a loan, or a simulated contract is involved. You have to write this in order to protect and preserve the rights of others. The recommendatory wasiyyah is like the wasiyyah that is made by a wealthy man for the needy or the poor relatives, or the masjid or any educational institution, and so on and so forth, for the tahfiz of the Quran, for providing clean, fresh drinking water to the destitute and the needy, those who are deprived of that water in Cambodia, the Philippines, Africa, and elsewhere. This is a recommendatory wasiyyah. The forbidden wasiyyah, and this is very, very important. The forbidden wasiyyah. Someone, a man, he was paralyzed, and he had 5 sons and 5 daughters. And the wives of his sons were tired of serving him for several months. One day, he woke up and found himself in a retirement center. He was very angry, he was exasperated, and he called for the retirement facility manager, and he asked him to bring him a notary or a legal expert or a lawyer. And he wrote everything to charitable organizations, everything. And his heirs, his sons and daughters, the 10 of them, they were waiting for him to die in order for them to enjoy his wealth. And when he died, they discovered the calamity and the catastrophe that befell them, and they were shocked. What do you think about this wasiyyah? Is it acceptable?
No.
This wasiyyah can never be acceptable because harm and damage was meant by the testator towards his heirs. So it's invalid. It's invalid, right? And this reminds us of the hadith إن الرجل لا يعمل بعمل أهل الخير 70 سنة. إن الرجل لا يعمل بعمل أهل الخير 70 سنة فإذا أوصى حاف في وصيته فيختم له بشر عمله فيدخل النار. So if you do something, you have to prepare an answer to it before Allah the Almighty. But if we have a case like this, if we have this case, how can we solve it? How can this problem solve it? The executor of the will, al-Wasiyyah al-Mukhtar, can nullify, invalidate, and cancel the Wasiyyah if he is sure that this Wasiyyah was meant to do damage and harm to the heirs or any of the heirs. So, Alhamdulillah, the Sharia doesn't leave us, hands tied. No, doesn't leave our hands tied. No, it gives us solutions to whatever problems we have. I'm gonna skip many examples. The detestable Wasiyyah, al-Wasiyyah al-Makruha. Yeah, if someone has a meager or a small property and he has his relatives and sons are very, very poor and very, very needy, and he bequeaths something to the poor, to others, right? So this is detestable. It's better for you to leave your own heirs wealthy enough and rich enough in order not to extend their hands asking others for help. And the acceptable Wasiyyah is when you give a share of your property to anyone while you are rich and your heirs are rich and they consent to that. They agree to that, you can do that, you can give it to someone who is upright in order to strengthen his faith, in order to strengthen his conditions, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay. Some fundamental issues related to the Wasiyyah. First, al-ijab, acceptance. What does ijab mean? Ijab here, or acceptance here, means that when someone says, I bequeath a portion of a house or $100,000 to someone, or to the mosque, or to an education institution, or anything. This is called acceptance. This is called acceptance or ijab. And what if the legatee, the one who receives the Wasiyyah, rejects the Wasiyyah after the death of the testator? What should be done to the bequeathed property? If someone bequeaths something to another and that person rejects it after his death. First of all, the acceptance or rejection of a Wasiyyah cannot be done except after, or it's only relevant after the death of the testator. It's only relevant after the death of the testator, and the legatee has, if the legatee has accepted or rejected the Wasiyyah, he cannot change his mind subsequently. If he accepts or rejects the Wasiyyah, he cannot change his mind subsequently. And if the legatee dies without accepting or rejecting the Wasiyyah becomes a part of his wealth. It becomes part of his wealth, and according to some Muslim scholars, it's up to his heirs. It's up to his heirs to either accept it or reject it. Okay. And this is totally different from a sales contract, عقد البيع. In a Wasiyyah, the wasi or the al-musi, the testator, has all the right to change or cancel the Wasiyyah. But if you sell something to anyone, you cannot nullify, you cannot cancel that sales contract unless the buyer consents to that action. And how to cancel a Wasiyyah? It can be cancelled either verbally or through taking an action. If you bequeath or if you write a Wasiyyah to someone that he will have a shop or a house, for example, and you sell it. You sell it to someone else. So this is a nullification and cancellation of the Wasiyyah. Yeah. The preconditioned and suspended Wasiyyah. in divorce, we have effective divorce and we have suspended divorce, right? If someone tells or says to his wife, if you go to so-and-so, if you do blah, 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 you're going to be divorced. This is suspended divorce. In Wasiyyah, we have suspended Wasiyyah as well. Listen to this. Someone may say, if this girl becomes a bride and wears the hijab, she is entitled to receive this portion of this house, for example. This is a good condition, and this is a good Wasiyyah, and this is an approved and acceptable Wasiyyah. But what if he says, if my daughter wears the hijab, she is going to be prevented from my wealth? Some people may do that. So this is a nullified and cancelled Wasiyyah, and this cannot be accepted at all. جزاكم الله خير. Thank you so much. I have to stop here, and I believe we still have, so many important things, but alhamdulillah. جزاكم الله خيرا. Thank you so much. جزاكم الله خيرا.
Thank you so much, mashallah. A lot of good knowledge. A big round of applause for our Sheikh. Sorry, just because we have other workshops planned.